Hey, what's up, guys? Okay, so chapter 309 of Boku no Hero Academia is out, and I'm actually very, very hyped to talk about this week's chapter because of the fact that all the big reveals that we got in this week's chapter, I predicted in chapter 308's review. So, this is actually new for me because I usually don't get this many things right in one chapter. It's usually like maybe one or two aspects of my predictions are right, and then the rest of them are completely off. But this time, pretty much everything I predicted in Chapter 308 was correct, except for the idea that Bakugo would actually be on this journey with Deku. And that's actually kind of something I'm a little disappointed by from this chapter, but I'll get into that later. But yo, anyway, let's just jump right into the chapter, which starts off after the fight between Muscar and Deku's ended, which, on the one hand, I kinda am a little disappointed that the fight ended so quickly, because this was Deku's first big opponent that he defeated solo. So I would like to see this fight actually last a little bit longer. This is the big grudge match for Deku. I would like to see more of the fight, but at the same time, it does really show off exactly how much stronger Deku has become now, because the last time these two fought, Deku really struggled against him. But in the last chapter, he defeated him pretty much with just one punch. So it does again show exactly how much stronger Deku's become over this journey of training to be a pro hero. But I mean, at the same time, Muscar was Deku's first really big opponent, and he's strong enough that I think that this fight should have really lasted a lot longer than it really did. If for no other reason, I would have liked to see Deku use his new abilities more in full display. But at the same time, I guess we did actually get to see him use all his abilities in the last chapter, or at least all four of the ones that he actually has access to now, because the second and third user of All for One, or sorry, One for All, still are not letting Deku actually use their abilities just yet. Or at least as far as we're aware, they're still not giving him access to their abilities. And I'm actually really curious as to why Horikoshi's really holding out those last two users of One for All. I mean, it kind of feels like it mostly has to do with the fact that the fandom is really suspecting that that's Bakugo and Kirishima, which I personally don't buy into that whole theory. Just because of the whole time travel aspect of it seems too far out there for what Horikoshi's really established as the overall world of My Hero Academia. I know it does have high fantasy because of the fact of the quirks and everything like that, but I feel like it's more grounded than going into the whole aspect of time travel. But still, there has to be a reason why Horikoshi's not giving us any information on these last two users, like what their names are and what their abilities are. And I almost feel like the longer that Horikoshi actually holds out on giving us the big reveal for these two characters, the more hype builds up by the idea that that actually might be Kirishima and Bakugo. And once we end up finding out that it's not those two characters, I feel like it's going to be a big letdown for the fandom, and a lot of people are going to react very negatively towards it. Now, we do actually get one last shot of Nakagame and Shido in this chapter, and we see that they're actually being held up by those old men from the building. And we see that Nakagame and Shido kind of recognize Deku, but say that he's completely different from the last time they actually saw him, and that they're a little disappointed that they actually didn't get a chance to thank him for helping them out. Which at first actually seems like a throwaway scene from the chapter, but you gotta remember, Deku is actually trying his hardest to keep his identity secret from the two of them. But the fact that they actually do recognize him does put him in danger of being outed to his classmates at UA, because they don't know where Deku is right now, and I'm sure a lot of them, including Bakugo, is trying his hardest to find out exactly where Deku is right now so that he can go and track him down. So the fact that these two characters now recognize him, if anyone from UA gets even a whiff that Deku might have been involved with this fight, and they actually come into contact with Nakagame or Shido, they could tell him, yeah, he was here and he went over that way. So that would put him one step closer to finding Deku and actually tracking him down. And even though, like I said in the beginning of the video, that we find out in this chapter that Bakugo is actually not part of the team that's going with Deku on this journey, I have no doubt that the second Bakugo finds out where Deku and All Might are, he's going to rush right towards them. And you know what? The same thing kind of goes for Uraraka, Ida, and Todoroki. I feel like if those three characters knew where Deku was and that he was in danger, they would drop everything to go rush towards him to help out, which is exactly what Deku doesn't want to happen. So that's why he's actually trying so hard in this chapter to actually keep his identity secret. He's even going as far as to use his smoke quirk while he's dropping Muscar off at the police station, because he does not want anyone identifying him. Now after that, we actually check back in with All Might, who's actually in the alleyway waiting for Deku, and we end up finding out that once the two of them end up meeting up, he gets in contact with Endeavor, Hawks, and Pestinus, who we end up finding out are actually in the same city, just not that far behind them, kind of trailing the two of them, keeping their distance, but still basically being in the area so that if anything pops off, they can be back there as support. Which, speaking of Hawks, we don't actually get a clear shot of his wings in this chapter. We can't tell if he's using them, or they're still just kind of burnt to a crisp. So we don't know exactly if he has his abilities back just yet, but I imagine if he's on this journey with Deku, All Might, Endeavor, and Pestinus, that he actually has to have his wings by now. Otherwise, there would be no point of him being on this journey because he wouldn't be useful in a fight. And I mean, yeah, the same kind of logic does apply to All Might. He doesn't have a quirk, so he wouldn't be useful in a fight, which is the reason why he's actually staying so far away from Deku, why he's actually going and engaging opponents. But you gotta remember, All Might's here to basically just be Deku's mentor when it comes to using the super strength portion of the One for All quirk, because he had it when it was at its strongest, so he would be the best suited to actually teach Deku how to properly manage that strength. And actually, speaking of properly learning how to use the strengthening quirk, We end up finding out in this chapter that Deku's actually using a support item similar to, or I think actually the same item that he used during the first My Hero Academia movie. I still haven't seen that movie just yet, so I don't know if it's exactly the same item. But from the images I've seen, it looks very similar to it. So we see that that's actually used to manage his strength when he's actually going all out in a fight. He still can't use 100% of the quirk's ability, but it does actually allow him to use more than he's usually accustomed to. Also, we end up finding out exactly why Deku's able to use his arms now despite being completely wrecked in the last fight, and that's because, as we find out during the flashback when Deku's still in the hospital, all his injuries that he got during the last fight were all external, and the reason why Recovery Girl said that if he wrecked his arms again, they would be non-usable is because he was doing internal damage to his arms. But since all his injuries this time were all external, it didn't really do that much damage to him permanently. And also the doctor mentions that at some point his anatomy changed, and they don't really give a clear description as to why it changed, but I feel like it's because the One For All quirk is basically strengthening his body over time so that he can be more accustomed to using more power. That's why, as we see in the chapter, originally he could only use at max 5% of the ability without wrecking his arms. Now he can do at a max of 45%. So it does show that over time the strengthening of his body is improving as he learns how to use more and more of the quirk. Now, even though the doctor said that Deku's perfectly fine, we see his mom, and this is actually a very heartbreaking scene, but we see his mom basically just crying over Deku, saying that she's actually taking back her words from the last time he got this injured, saying that she'll put his trust in him to continue his journey to become a hero. She's actually taking all that back now and saying that she just wants her son to come back to her, and she wants him to be safe. She doesn't want to see him in the hospital anymore. And you kind of get where she's coming from. You understand why a mother would be saying this, because her son went from being quirkless to being just a normal kid, or, kind of normal kid without a quirk, to being this kid who's actually constantly in the hospital, constantly being damaged. And now, on top of that, he's being hunted down by these two major villains. Of course, you'd be worried about him. Of course, you wouldn't want him to continue down the path of being a hero. But one thing that Deku actually kind of reminds her of in this chapter after telling her the full story, it doesn't matter if he actually quits being a hero or not. They still have the ability to find him wherever he is. So, because of the fact that they could track him down, he has to leave. And you know what? I gotta hand it to Deku's mom in this chapter, because even though she's heartbroken, even though she wants as a mother nothing more than her son to be safe and be at home with her, she realizes that there's no going back on this journey for him. He has to go on this journey and defeat Shigaraki and All For One before they can strike back at him and everyone he loves. So she kind of relents to him going on this journey. Even though she doesn't say it in the chapter, she does kind of give him her silent permission. And that's got to be heartbreaking for her, because I can imagine that since Deku doesn't want anyone knowing where he is, he's not going to be in contact with her. So she's never going to hear from him again unless he succeeds in this mission. If he ends up dying, she'll never know about it. So the nerve-wrackingness of basically having her son be out there in the world and not knowing if he's okay or if he's dead, I can't imagine going through that kind of pain. And you know what? I also got to hand it to her for not basically going off on All Might in this chapter, because she has every right to blame him for everything that happened to Deku, because as far as she's aware, until Deku met All Might, he had no danger in his life. Like, there was literally no situation that would have ended him up in the hospital, basically being hunted down by villains. All that happened because of the fact that he met All Might. So if he didn't meet him, then her son would have been a perfectly normal kid. Sure, he would have been happy or unhappy because he didn't have a quirk, but he would have been safe, and that's all she cares about. And we know that All Might definitely feels guilty for putting Deku in the situation, and I feel like that's the reason why he mainly wants to go with Deku on this journey, so that he's not facing the danger by himself. And I'm sure that his mom actually feels a lot better knowing that not only is All Might going with him on the journey, but the top 3 heroes as well. But anyway, guys, that's it for this week's chapter. Let me know in the comment section down below what you thought about it. Like, that whole scene with Deku's mom in the flashback, were you crying? Because I gotta be honest, seeing how upset she was over Deku being constantly hurt and pleading with him not to be a hero anymore, I kind of got a little teary-eyed myself. But let me know in the comment section down below what you thought about it. That's it for the video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, drop me a like, subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.